Welcome to this Frequency Matters podcast. I'm Pat Hindle, and today I'm talking with Chris Marki, CEO of Marki Microwave, among his many other talents, such as an entrepreneur, design engineer, podcaster, guitarist, to name a few. Welcome back to the podcast, Chris.
Hey, Pat, how's it going?
Good. So we're heading into IMS 2024 in June in Washington, D.C. So I thought it'd be great to talk about some of the trends you're seeing and what Marki's doing to address them. And so as we do approach the event, what are you seeing in the marketplace as trends over the past year or so?
It's been an interesting, I would say 2 years actually, since IMS started up again, right? Since Denver.
True.
Uh, it's been, we were at the tail end of COVID and business was booming, I think, for everybody. And then we had a bit of a COVID winter for a lot of the different markets. And that was certainly starting to take hold at the last event. So I would say, at least in market trends, you're seeing this weird situation where you see a very active aerospace and defense market for obvious reasons. And you see a lot of activity across the board when it comes to pushing to higher frequencies and smaller form factors. But you also see a sluggishness in some of the end markets that have historically been tailwinds to the RF business, where it's wireless and communications. I mean, Apple recently had some bad iPhone sales, right? And that made some headlines. Certainly, there's the China effect, where a lot of the big RF companies were selling a lot of hardware and product into China for, I assume now, decades. That's really dying down, and now you hear a lot of companies de-emphasizing their China exposure. It used to be, so, we went full circle. It used to be the trend to showcase how much China business you did. And now we're saying, look how much I don't have. How good am I?
Yep.
So, in Marki's case, we probably never had that much because we never had a very large and scaled sales force. So effectively, we never benefited or were harmed by that. But I think it's an interesting marketplace now for the RF. Very active, especially aerospace and defense, and you're seeing that emphasized in the conference calls and the public companies. That's not going away anytime soon for all sorts of reasons we could talk about. But it's also an exciting time, I think, if you're pushing the envelope on performance, you are going to higher frequency, and you're well, I guess if you're adopting our mantra, which is to push performance. If you push performance and you try to set new world records and break the performance barriers, you always have a customer to talk to. That's for sure.
Yeah. So speaking on that front, what advancements has Marki made since the last IMS?
So last IMS, we showcased, I think, we had two main booths or, two main demo areas. One demo was showcasing a lot of our millimeter wave packaging capability. At the time, we had demonstrated a bunch of 1mm connectorized products where we take our own ICs, or it could be other people's ICs, but mostly our own ICs, put them into, modules and sell them as modules, because we did see that there was a lot more of a pull from the market in terms of, doing a lot more lab testing at higher frequency. And what I mean is like beyond 70 gig up through, in this case, about 110 gig, 120 gig. And we heard from a lot of customers that are pushing to D-band as the future, and that's up at 140, potentially up through 170. So we showcased that packaging capability last year, and we also showcased that we were getting much more heavily into the MMIC filter area. And we've talked a lot about the MMIC filters with Microwave Journal. We've done several webinars, and I recommend people go listen to those because I think they were pretty well done. I think they perfectly summarize, I think, what our capabilities are and where we see that market going. But since the show, since San Diego, we've just done more of that. So we've been pushing the surface mount filters in our CSP package, our chip scale package, to 70 gigahertz. We've been, actually, this is one of those areas where the customers are ahead of us in a lot of ways. We considered it an R&D project to start porting surface mount into the CSP. And we have active customers doing production level design work with these chipsets we haven't even actually developed. So they're pushing us as fast as we can go to get these things to market. So we see no end in sight in terms of small form factor filter capability. And of course, the packaging itself is a platform. It's not really, it's agnostic of it being a filter versus a mixer versus a power divider, let's say. And so we are what I call it internally, I call it spanning, right? So we've demonstrated the capability. We now have the CSP, and we are doing as much as we can that makes sense in these packages. And they go to very high frequency. We'll be showcasing that at the show.
So can you tell us a little bit more about the size and performance trade-offs there?
Yeah, so with anything in engineering, there's a trade, and we discussed this trade in the Microwave Journal webinar. So go listen to the one I gave. I guess what was that? Last November. But the basic idea is that you don't get something for free. At least there's usually a little bit of a trade. So in the case of the mimic filter technology, we are definitely suffering from a degraded Q factor. But at the same time, we benefit from multiple smaller form factor, meaning, a filter that might have taken up centimeters of area now take up maybe a few millimeters square. So
Wow.
we have packages that we'll be showing at the show that are 1.5 by 1.5 millimeters, 2.5 by 2.5 millimeters, 2 millimeters by 1.3 millimeters. So we're talking about grains of rice, really. And what we found, interestingly enough, is that even now a 5 millimeter QFN package for a mimic is too big. So people have, like, the pendulum swung so far beyond, like, where I said, okay, originally we said, well, we'll do a chip scale, we'll do a mimic development, but we'll put in a standard QFN package. And people are saying even that's too big.
Wow.
I was really surprised. It was a pleasant surprise, obviously, because we had been developing the CSP in the background the whole time. But that's really been a steroid boost, I would say, in terms of like being more aggressive, trying to push the envelope as fast as we can.
So you're moderating the Voice of the Founder panel session at IMS. Why do you think this is such an important topic?
Well, I guess you led with it that I guess I'm a bit of a chameleon person, professional. When it's convenient to be an engineer, I'm an engineer. And when it's convenient for me to be a CEO or entrepreneur, I talk about that. Really, it gets me out of jail, right? In different conversations. So if I have an uncomfortable business meeting, I just say I'm an engineer. I don't know. I'm not that sophisticated, and vice versa, right?
You have to talk to my boss about that.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. I'll say I'll go have to talk to Duncan, right? He does pricing. I don't do pricing. So I guess I'd put it this way. You've known me a long time, Pat. You know that I took over the company from my dad. So we have this generational shift that went on at Marki, and we're actually kind of rare. And I think about that a lot because and I think about how many businesses in the microwave area were formed by guys like my dad. Specifically, people who were engineers first and business people second. And I meet people who have ideas where they want to, start a company or something like that, and I'll give them advice. And I've met plenty of amazing founders who were engineers first and business people second. And I guess I've always had a soft spot for those companies, companies that are engineering driven and not business guy driven. I guess there's a fair amount of like skepticism I have towards somebody who can get into our market and do something great unless they're like really, really gifted engineers. So this whole idea came up where I said, I have so much respect for some of these guys, like Paul Blount from Custom Mimic, like John Richardson from X Microwave, like my dad. And whenever you sit around and have a beer with these guys, they're incredibly interesting people who have this wisdom that you can only gain through the trials and tribulations of starting the company. Because so many engineers in our field look at people like me or John or whoever, or Paul, and they think to themselves, I could do that. And probably they could, but I would say that there's definitely things that they haven't thought about that need to be brought to light, right? So I guess my point is that I always felt like I had a weird vantage point because I got to see I get to see both sides of things, and I got to learn from my dad and watch him do it, and I've become very good friends with people like Paul and John, and Gabriel Rubiz is going to be on the panel, who's you know the preeminent wizard of our industry, and I just thought to myself, boy, it would be really fun to just interview these guys in front of everybody. And I was talking to my friend Jim Buckwalter, Professor Jim at UC Santa Barbara, and he said, I like that idea so much. I want to try to help you get that accepted. And Jim's well keyed into IMS and IEEE and all that. And so this doesn't happen without Jim's help. And so he's going to co-moderate with me. And we approach the IMS people, and there's some very good people doing some great work at the startup pavilion. And it turned out they were thinking about the same kinds of things. So it was kind of funny. Like, I didn't know that they were doing it. I kind of independently concocted this idea in the fall, and it all just came together. So I encourage anybody who wants to hear from the source, especially, let me put it this way. If you're an engineer in our business, you need to come to this panel, because every single person in the panel, including myself and Jim, we are technical. We are not business people. And we've figured out how to do the business side. When people ask me what kind of job or what kind of education should I get, I'd always say engineers first, because we're like diodes. We can go their way, but non-technical people can't come our way. And I firmly believe that. So we're doing this panel session, I think at 11 o'clock on the main floor in the Micro Apps Pavilion. It's going to be me and Jim hosting. It's going to be free for everybody, I'm really glad the startup people were able to get it that way and not, through the paid part of the conference. But if you want to hear about what it takes to have an idea and take it to market and get funding or not get funding, depending on how you do it, and then potentially exit or not exit, like a guy like me, I haven't exited. John Richardson exited, but not exactly, because he got bought by a private equity firm, and that's different, right? Paul exited because he got bought by Corvo, but as you can tell, this is my longest answer because I think it's the most interesting thing I've done in a while, which is to put this together. And incidentally, I'll just tell you a little anecdote. So I called up John and I talked to him about the idea. He said, "Oh, I love that. I'd love to participate. Chris, I've been thinking about writing a book on my experiences." And then I called up Paul an hour later. I said, "Paul, I'm thinking about doing this. Are you in?" And he's like, "I love the idea. Chris, I've been thinking about writing a book about my experiences." And I was like, "That's hilarious." Like, exactly, So there are a lot of people out there like myself, like John, like Paul, who are open and willing to talk about what we know, in terms of what it takes. And what I hope, actually, one of the outcomes of this is that there are probably going to be people in the audience who will walk up to me or walk up to John and say, "Hey, can I talk to you afterwards?" To me, that, like, we need to be able to cultivate that spirit. And I want it to be personally, I want it to be at the engineering level. I don't want it to be a suit. I want it to be like some guy who's maybe a little disgruntled with his company, thinks he has better ideas than they're willing to fund, and he knows he can do it himself. Because that's what my dad was. And I think that's what Paul was. I could do this better, and that's where the value is generated. It's always where the value is generated in this marketplace. So, I love it. I'm really excited about that, and I hope it goes well. I think the only thing that'll be difficult, I think, is going to be the 60-minute time limit.
Yeah, you won't be able to stop. But I'm sure everybody kind of had a different journey. So there's a lot of different wisdom to share there because people have different experiences, different paths.
Yeah, I think so. Good and bad both ways. But that's the point, right? The best books I've read on business are the ones, especially like with like entrepreneurship and stuff like that. They're the books that are negative. It's the books that are happy and like, and then I became a billionaire. Like, that stuff doesn't help. You have to learn about the cold sweats and the not making payroll and the potential of like getting sued. That's what you have to learn about. That's what prevents engineers, I think especially from jumping in. Is because I think, well, I didn't go to school on this. How could I know that?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that can happen, so you got to be ready for them.
That's right. Yeah. So if it goes well, maybe we'll make it an annual thing. Who knows?
Great. So how about can we finish, what's next for Marki?
Um, just I guess more of the same. We've been in about a 4-year process now since just before COVID started. We went through a pretty massive overhaul. We brought in an executive team. We scaled the company for the next leg of growth, and that's all pretty much been completed, if you will. We're not adding more roster. We have the team. It's kind of like a think of it like a sports rebuild, right? The GM, who's kind of like me, puts together the roster that's gonna, the starting 11, if you will. This is the team that we're gonna play with. There's no more team to sign. We're not going and getting Messi. We got Messi. we got Suarez, whoever we need. So I think we have a great team. Duncan and the sales and marketing has built out the sales channel in a much bigger way. So now we need to go sell the products we have, honestly. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity out there, especially with what's going on in the world.
Yeah, and you scaled up your manufacturing a couple years ago, right?
Yeah, well, yeah. So I think we've made announcements over the last few years that we like more than doubled our factory space, and that build out is essentially complete. We have again like a full roster of people within the operations area, and holding down the fort and doing a great job of it. So it's purely now go execute. There's no more excuses, right? The team, you have the players you wanted, and so now go win business. Go well, but even then, it's not even about that. At the core, go find problems you can help people solve. If you do that really well, you're always going to be good. And so we're just in that mode now. Execute, go solve the problems that people have.
Well, great, Chris. Thanks for talking with me today about the microwave market and how Marki is bringing these new solutions to the industry. It's great to hear.
Yeah, look forward to seeing you again in just a few weeks away.
Great. And to our listeners, you can find more podcasts at podcast.microwavejournal.com. Thanks for listening.